Hey guys, so I just want to make a quick gun cleaning video. We did it once before, it didn't turn out that great, but since then Taylor's learned how to edit and she's doing a fantastic job. So without too much ado, so the first thing you want to do every time you start messing with your gun at all is going to be a safety check, right? So when you're inside your house and you're doing a safety check, the first thing you want to do is point in the safe direction. What's the safe direction in your house? So a safe direction is going to be a floor, ceiling, or a floor wall seam is a good bet, preferably not exterior wall, or if you can find a corner, that's even better. That'll serve as a safe direction. That should be sufficient to stop around in case something happens. So safe direction, down and away. I've got my finger off the trigger. Check for a source of ammunition. There is none. Lock the slide to the rear, check the chamber, check the magazine well, look away, check the chamber and the magazine well again, and I'll just do that just to make sure. And we've got a safe and empty gun. So first thing we're gonna do is disassemble it. So we're done our safety check. We've already locked the slide to the rear, so the firing pin is charged. We'll go ahead and point in the safe direction again, squeeze the trigger. We'll use the slide lock lever here, move that back just a teeny bit, the slide, and then push it forward, and it should slide right off. So now you've got two pieces. You've got your lower receiver and your slide. Take the buffer spring assembly off the slide and the barrel should slide right out. So that's about as far as you should break down your pistol. If you're going to clean it, you really don't need to break it down much more than that. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is put some gloves on. Usually a good idea. We're going to be working with some chemicals here, so we'll put some gloves on just to make sure we're safe. I spent 25 years in the military not wearing gloves, so I might as well start now. So the first thing I do is I use solvent. I don't really have any specific solvent I use. This is Riptide Advanced Gun Cleaner, and I'll hit that right on the barrel. One or two is fine. I'll let that soak while I deal with the other pieces. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the lower receiver and I'm going to use a nylon brush, and I'll just kind of brush down the major pieces here. I'm going to run through the rails on both sides and start down towards the trigger mechanism, just trying to break up any loose pieces that might be easily dislodged. Run on top of the cruciform up there. And then I'll take a rag, and all of this stuff you can find on Amazon. I like the Otis. Otis makes good stuff. They have good cleaning kits. And then I'll just wipe it down. And then once I'm done with that, I'll grab a Q-tip and kind of get the little bits and pieces that I can't get with a rag or the brush. And I don't go crazy. Glocks typically don't require a ton of maintenance. Like, I mean, when I'm rolling after the range and I just come home and clean it, I can clean this in about 5 minutes. So once I'm done with that, you can see, like, you're not going to get a ton. You don't have to clean it until you get white Q-tips. It's fine. So that's pretty much done. Then I'll take the top slide. So a couple things to keep in mind when you're cleaning the slide. Same thing. I'll use the nylon brush to kind of dislodge any large chunks or anything, kind of brush it off. I might hit the front sight a little bit. If I've got iron sights, I've got an optic. We'll talk about that in a second. And run it through the rails. And then I'll do the same thing with a Q-tip. All right, run along the rails. So I don't use anything liquid except for one exception on the top slide. The reason is because you've got an internal firing pin here. So you got the locking bar right here. I'm sorry, not the locking bar, the firing pin safety. And if you can see it right there, if you press on that and shake the slide up and down, you can't hear it probably, but you can hear the safety. You can hear the firing pin moving freely in that chamber, in the channel. You want to hear that. If you put solvent up here, too much oil, it starts to get inside the firing pin channel. It can actually gunk up your firing pin so it doesn't move in there, which is obviously a problem. If you pull the trigger and the firing pin doesn't move, your gun's not going to go bang when it should. So don't use anything on the top slide that's liquid, again, with one exception, which I'll cover later, very minimal. I'll usually take a wire brush as well, and I'll just hit the breech face. A little bit right there, and then I'll wipe everything down. And I'm good to go with the slide. If you have an optic, you can get a couple of different things. This is it's actually a Nikon camera lens cleaner. And just kind of brush the dust off the optic here and there. Read the manufacturer's recommendations on what to clean, how to clean the glass. This has another piece for a lens. It's generally designed for a camera lens, which I can't really use on this because the glass is actually tilted in there. It doesn't really reach. If I can get it in there, it doesn't really reach. So I'll just use a rag if it gets really nasty in there, but otherwise I can just brush it off, brush the dust off, and it's fine. So, and that's that. The recoil spring assembly, I don't mess with that too much unless I see something obviously filthy on it, and I'll wipe it off, but usually you don't really have to deal with that too much. So the barrel. The barrel, I'll wipe it down a little bit. I might take a Q-tip and run it in on the other side of the barrel lug and kind of little cracks and crevices here. And that's it for that. Now, you'll get some buildup after a few hundred rounds on the feed ramp, which is the larger ramp on the end of the barrel here. So a good way to do that is I just grab it and I'll put it down with the feed ramp, and I'll take a wire brush. Just run along there a few times and you'll usually have no problem cleaning the carbon off that. Do it on the other side. And that's about it for the exterior of the barrel. The internal, the bore. So a couple different things you can do with the bore. You can use a bore brush. I usually do. You probably don't need to if you're going to use a bore snake, which I'm about to use, but just run it through there a couple times. Make sure you have the right size bore brush though. They come in all the different sizes. This is a 9mm bore brush. If you start trying to slam a 45 caliber bore brush through a 9mm bore, you're going to have some problems and you can get it stuck. It's not fun to get those out. So I'll just run the bore brush through there a few times. And then I'll use a bore snake. These things are awesome. And usually you only have to run this thing through one time. It's kind of all in one. It's got a wire brush portion right here. And the rest just kind of drags all the gunk out of there in one shot. So just take the weight, throw it down the bore like that. And then one time through, and usually it's only one time. I don't think I've ever had to do it more than one time. Yeah, and we're good, right? So, and that's it. So, at this point, we're clean. All we have to do is oil it up and reassembly. So oiling a Glock is really simple. It doesn't require a lot of oil. These things don't need to be oiled up nearly as much as a lot of other guns like 1911s. So, and again, I have like 10 different oils downstairs in my garage. I don't know which ones I use more regularly, but this one here, this is Slip 2000. I don't know where I got this, some giveaway or something like that, Extreme Weapons Lubricant, because everything's extreme these days. So all I'm going to do is actually, the reason I like this is because it's got a really fine tip, right? So I'll just put a tiny bit of oil on the top underneath the slide here, just one tiny drop, kind of rub it in. Like I can barely see that, not a lot at all, because again, I don't want any liquid getting in that firing pin channel. So once I'm done with that, I'll start assembling. I might put a little bit of oil on the barrel as well. Just kind of rub that in. Some trains of thought, I don't usually oil the feed ramp. Some people say you should oil the feed ramp. I never have. I've never had an issue. I'm not sure why you would oil the feed ramp. And then the recoil spring assembly just comes right in here. When you put that on, just make sure you have a gap between the buffer and the barrel lug there. If there's no gap, it's not going to be assembled correctly and you might have issues. So, slide is finished. On the receiver, I'm just going to put a little bit of oil on the rails, all 4 rails, and the locking bar. That's it. And then I will just reassemble, put the slide over the rails. So, fully assembled. I want to make sure it's assembled correctly, so I'm going to do a functions check. So how we do a function check with a Glock is make sure it's pointed in a safe direction, it's already charged. I'm going to press the trigger and I should hear the hammer fall, or I should hear the firing pin charge. I'm going to hold the trigger down and then charge it, and then I'll release the trigger. I should hear a metallic click. There's my click, and then I'll squeeze the trigger again and I should hear the firing pin again. And that's it. Once that's done, I know my firearm is assembled correctly and I'm done cleaning it and I'm done performing a functions check. And that's it.